All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, just wanted to say thanks to everyone for attending today. Pretty excited to roll out this new toolkit that we've developed in association with VEIC and with funds from the APPA. I did want to mention up top that this webinar is being recorded. So the screen, and if you're sharing your video, you'll be recorded, and this recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for on-demand viewing. So welcome again. Today we're going to talk about electric vehicle toolkit. The title of this webinar is Charging Forward with Electric Vehicles and New Toolkit. And like I mentioned before, this toolkit was developed in association with VEIC and APPA's DEED Demonstration of Energy Efficiency Grant Program. So here's the project team once again. We also had a bunch of great local participants who were partners and helped us develop our case studies. You'll see Clark Public Utilities there listed as one of the folks. Speakers today, myself, David Roberts will also be on the call. He is our counterpart at VEIC who did a lot of the, all of the back work to develop the tool. Thanks, David, I see you there. We've also got Jeremy Caron on the call who is going to speak a little bit here up top. Just a quick project overview of what's included in here. There's the planning tool, which is a spreadsheet. It's an Excel-based spreadsheet with EV forecasting tools and charging resources. There's also a collection of case studies, folks that we worked with to gather information from and help us develop and refine our Excel forecasting tool and some of the other calculators that are included inside of that tool. And there's actually a pretty sizable marketing toolkit aspect to the tool that includes engagement resources, engagement templates, what types of hashtags to use on social media if you're looking to promote an EV program, all of that stuff, which I actually found helpful in promoting this webinar. At this point, Jeremy, I'm going to put you on the spot just to talk about a little bit about how this project started. Some of the reasons why you guys identified that this was a good project to do and some of the needs that our customers had and that sort of thing. So go ahead and take it away, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. So, I think this project came about as a result of some discussions at the APPA conference that was hosted in Austin, Texas. And conversations that started maybe a little bit before that as well. There had already been several EV tools developed through APPA and the DEED program that helped communities start to think about EVs, but there really wasn't one sort of comprehensive toolkit that provided a really well-rounded set of resources for communities to start that and utilities to start that planning process. And so when we first started having these discussions with VEIC, we wanted to make sure that this was a toolkit that had a lot of flexibility, was sort of a one-stop shop for EV planning, and had the ability to be somewhat open source and manipulatable for the various users that are out there. And so we worked diligently with our team at VEIC to put together this proposal and get this project approved for a DEED grant. And we're excited to be awarded that grant, I think in December of 2019. The time has gotten away from me at this point. But we assembled a great team through, IAMU staff, our peer Matt Babbitts at Clark County Public Utilities out in Southern Washington, and then also the VEIC personnel. And Dave certainly helped lead those efforts for VEIC, but I want to make sure we're also recognizing their hardworking team and all of the staff that put a lot of time and resources into developing this content, including Tom McCarron, who was influential in developing the planning tool, Emily Lewis O'Brien, who also assisted with the tool in the case studies, and spearheaded the case study effort, and then Aaron Moriarty, who worked on a lot of those engagement resources. So a big shout out to all of them, and a thank you to them. You know, this tool wouldn't have been possible without the expertise of the VEIC team, and I think they've done an excellent job to start creating an effective tool for communities and utilities to start evaluating EV adoption and the requisite charging infrastructure necessary to meet that EV growth and EV demand over time, as well as you know, starting to think about electric vehicle charging management programs, so that you know, we can either take advantage of potentially bi-directional charging down the road, or storage capacity in electric vehicles, or help manage demand growth from EV adoption. And then also projecting out for communities, you know, what's the impact, especially for electric-only utilities, of adding all of this new EV demand and EV infrastructure to your system, and what are the opportunities and what are the challenges that your organization is going to face. So excited to see so many folks here today, and to dive into this content. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jeff and Dave, and take it away.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. I really appreciate that. And like Jeremy, I would say this has been a huge effort from a lot of different folks, and you know, the result of all their hard work is this tool. So very excited to share everyone. Just to get a little meta on this webinar, my plan as I go through this, just so you guys know, is to go fast through the slides. Then we're going to do 2 demos at the end of this, which I'm going to go very slow through. And I will reserve a good amount of time at the end so that we can ask questions. If you have a question, feel free to throw that in the chat. And when I get to the end and stop sharing my screen, then I will try to answer all of those questions. I will say, if you miss something because I'm going too fast, this will be on demand on YouTube. And you can always call me and we'll have a follow-up meeting to better use the tool. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So question, you know, we've all talked about this tool so much so far, but what does the tool actually do? Well, the tool is meant to forecast EV adoption rates. It's also meant to help you develop a strategy around addressing the rising adoption rates of EVs. And to help you develop a strategy, it's going to give you data. Some of that data is forecasted or projections. A lot of it, or I'll say most of the EV market data, is modeled around IHS market data, which is really a really reputable source of data in the industry. And so, yeah, this tool can help utilities evaluate plug-in electric vehicle adoption and load growth rates, energy and capacity costs to serve EV loads, EV charging availability and market shortfall. So that's, you know, as we say, our market adoption rate is going to increase, you know, X% over the years. How many plugs do we need, both public and private, for these customers to be able to conveniently charge their vehicles? It'll also help you evaluate the costs and benefits of utility managed charging programs. That's a really cool tab on the tool. Basically, helping utilities decide what sorts of ways they can influence customer behavior around charging, so that it's both beneficial to the customer and cost effective for the utility. And then it can also help you evaluate the costs and benefits of public charging programs, like I said. So how is the tool organized? I'm going to just breeze through this slide because we're going to find that out more as we do the demos. But basically, there's EV market information, forecast EV adoption rates based on inputs or default values. This one is really cool. It basically calculates the percentile growth rate for all of the states and territories in the United States, and will give you a low, medium, and high growth rate for EV adoption. And so that's the recommendation. But one of the coolest things of this tool is that it's incredibly open source. So if you say, oh, you know, I think that adoption rate is too high for my part of the state of Iowa, I know we have some national folks on here, so maybe you're down in Louisiana and adoption rate is lower. You think the growth rate will be lower than the percentile for across the United States. You can adjust that, those assumptions to better model the data for your part of the country. So it's very cool in that respect. There's also utility information, so you can enter different things about the cost of your rates. You can enter in, let's see here. You can enter in some really interesting stuff like your system peak cost per megawatt year, average on peak dollars per megawatt hour of cost to the utility, so on and so forth. We'll get that further later on. You can input just the straight up customer rates for residential, commercial charging. It does managed charging, so it can evaluate the benefits and impacts of a managed charging program. EVSE market, we're going to see that acronym a lot, EVSE. There's a lot of acronyms, PHEV, BEV, EV, around electric vehicles, but I'll just take a second to talk about some of those. EVSE is electric vehicle service equipment. So that's going to be your chargers, which is usually, the poles out of the ground, and your plugs attached to those poles. So usually it's around 2 plugs per EV charger. So EVSE, electric vehicle supply equipment. And then we can also talk about EVSE strategies. So, here we've evaluated what the market is. There's X amount publicly available but privately owned plugs in your market. And, in order to meet forecasted demand for charging resources, you can develop a strategy to grow your publicly available and publicly owned, if you're a municipal utility, charging plugs. So very cool stuff there. Also, just want to say, David or Jeremy, if you guys want to interrupt me at all, you're very welcome to. I'm going to keep going here. So some notes on the tool. Like I said before, very open access. So there are locked cells in this tool. You can take this tool and do whatever you want to it. Background data is visible. So there is some very expensive IHS market data for EV purchases and registrations on a state-by-state disaggregation. That data is totally visible, and you can do whatever you want with that data. There's also built into this tool, you'll see there's this really handy color guide here. So this orange color is a required user input. Purple is an optional user input. Blue is a default value. And this gray with orange text as a calculated value. This is really handy as you're going through the tool. There's a lot of default values where the tool is asking you for a number. What's your average off-peak dollar per megawatt hour? You might know that number, you might not, and if you don't, there's a default value in there for you. So those defaults are not just random numbers. They're based on research from the case studies and other research that VEIC did. It's also based on interviews that we did for the case studies and expertise from just being in the street. And I will say there's a lot of comments in the tool. So if you see a red triangle in the corner of a cell, hover over that and it'll give you some more information. So there is the EV tab. This one forecasts EV adoption rates given on what state you're in. This is only disaggregated to the state level, but you'll see as we get to the tool, there are some different options if you want to dive down even deeper. So this EV market tab, all of this data is fed from the market data tab, which is further down here to the right. On this tool. And basically what this thing is going to do is it's going to take the most recent market share. So the percentage of all cars on the road that are electric vehicles. You'll see this is California. It's a very high market share out there. So it's take that and also average a certain amount of years of past market share growth trends to give it some trend data to project out the growth of EVs. And you can also set a market share maximum down here, which is also very handy. If you say, you know, hey, there are these old timers who are going to be driving their diesel powered trucks, you know, forever. And we think we're only going to be able to hit 90% market saturation when it comes to EVs. Well, you can set that down here. Let's say you're a more rural community and, you know, you think that number will be lower or for whatever reason, you can basically adjust that number. So the tool gives you a ton of functionality and gives you, the user, a lot of power to be able to model growth as you see fit. Of course, with our guidelines here, purple text. Utility information. This is going to talk about the residential accounts that are here. Another really cool thing in here is daytime charging factor. So that's the percent of vehicles present in the service territory in day versus night. So let's say, for example, you know, you're in, you know, Peoria, Illinois, and you've got a lot of people who commute from, you know, Dunlap, Pekin, Metamora, Morton, who commute into Peoria during the day. And in that case, you would say your daytime charging factor is over 100%. It's probably more like 150, right? Because all these people drive into town, they are plugging in their electric vehicles into the company provided EV charging on site, and then they go home. So their daytime charging factor would be high. This is a webinar that's Iowa centric, so I'll talk more about Iowa. I would say most of the towns here, your daytime charging factor is probably going to be either 100% or anywhere between 60 and 90%. And if you hover over the cell, there's more info to help you determine that number. Gasoline price is used to calculate consumer economics. There's a really handy functional tool later on in this calculator that talks about how beneficial EV ownership is to the consumer. So that's based entirely on a cost perspective. And so a lot of us know, you know, with the rising price of gas, you as a utility can adjust a few values and see how, you know, how much of a net positive to the consumer you want EV ownership to be. Yeah, and there's an option to include cost inflation. So, you know, let's say the cost of these things is going up. To implement, we can do that there. And that's real cost inflation rate. There is already some inflation match built into this tool. There's another tab, which is the rates tab. Current prices paid by residential and commercial customers. We're assuming that people are going to charge these EVs either at their home or their business. There's not an industrial rate factored into this. So yeah, system benefit charges or other non-revenue charges. Yeah, again, there's options to include cost inflation there. So the electric vehicle service equipment market, this is going to help you forecast out your ports needed. That's this yellow line. And then given the data that you input, how you want to aggressively grow your EVSE market on the public side. You know, we have privately supplied ports and utility constructed ports. So yeah, this is really cool because it also takes into account the existing plugs which are on your network, which can be estimated by you or data collected by you. And that'll help you further kind of point out how your supplied ports are going to grow in the future. And so once you have clearly developed what your EVSE market is, your electric vehicle supply equipment strategy can then be formulated to get your basically your supplied ports to match with your ports needed over time. Yeah, so inputs can be planned or different build out and incentive strategies can be forecasted into the future. This is a super helpful tab. You know, as you're looking forward to the future of EV load growth and you're trying to plan out your system and anticipate the different costs that may be incurred, you know, this is an incredible tool to help you do that. It's extremely powerful, and we're going to demo it here in just a little bit. Another thing here that's really cool is, your incentives that you offer for installing charging. If you decide to offer incentives, that also has a really cool interactive effect with plug supplied as it approaches meeting the ports needed here. So yeah. So yeah, let's dive right into it. Let's take a look at the tool. We're going to do our first demo here, and I'm just going to dive right into it. So as you'll see here on the bottom, and sorry, pardon me for one moment, I'm going to have to move my Zoom out of the way. Okay, there we go. Can everyone see my screen okay? Could I get a thumbs up from somebody on the video? All right, cool, good. So we are looking at the tool. This is the EV Toolkit spreadsheet. Like I said, developed by IAMU and VEIC. Basically, there's some really good color coding here. There's a bunch of backend data, but as you walk through this tool, basically you're going to want to flow from left to right here. So the introduction, it talks about what this tool does, why it's useful, what it doesn't do. There's some stuff we don't do that I will point out now. We don't do heavy duty EVs. That market isn't really clearly developed yet. We just had the Cybertruck get announced a while back, and of course, Ford's new F-50 Lightning, and we've got some really attractive options from Rivian and some other EV manufacturers, but we just haven't seen that market play out yet, and this tool does not address heavy-duty EVs. So that's going to be your large trucks and your other maybe more industrial electric vehicles. It does not automatically forecast EV adoption rates. It does forecast EV adoption, but basically, there's a lot of variables. You can test out different growth scenarios. There's a lot of variables that affect how this adoption is going to increase in your area. And so we basically did all the calculations, and we give you the opportunity to pick which variables you'd like to tweak, and you can kind of see what happens in different scenarios. It does not estimate monthly, daily, hourly load. This is a high-level forecasting tool. It's not meant to be a instantaneous, tool in that sense. And it does not estimate distribution system upgrade costs. Other tools are available for this purpose, but what the tool does do is tell you a little bit about load growth, which will be helpful in developing your own costs here. So instructions, I'm not going to go through this because I'm going to basically teach you as I'm going through the tool. Contents, this is really good. It kind of talks about what each tab is doing here in this tool. And then there's a glossary. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of acronyms. Us engineers like to use a lot of acronyms. I'll go through these briefly because it will be important later on. So BEV, battery electric vehicle. DCFC is a DC fast charger. It's a high-powered electric vehicle service equipment asset that provides DC electricity to a vehicle. These are the super fast chargers that you hear about, 30 minutes to 45 minutes, full charge. EV electric vehicle, EVSE electric vehicle service equipment, PHEV. This is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. I believe some of the Nissan Leafs are PHEVs. There's a lot of other PHEVs. Public level 2 EVSE. That's going to be a publicly accessible level 2 electric vehicle service equipment set. Publicly accessible becomes important when we talk about some of the grant funding opportunities for EV charging. Yeah, publicly means that it's available publicly. So your charger will show up on an app. People can just roll up to your charger and charge and then drive away. Level 2 EVSE vehicle supply equipment. That's supplying AC power to the vehicle, typically between 5 to 10 kilowatts. This is the, middle speed EV charging. Level, yeah. Plug is just a plug. It's an individual plug serving one vehicle. Each electric vehicle service equipment asset may have more than one plug, typically known as an EVSE port. Usually when we say, you know, for this EVSE, we have 2 plugs. That's pretty common. WPL2, workplace level 2, EVSE. It's a level 2 charger that's at a workplace, basically. So you can charge your car during the day as you work. So I am going to go ahead and get right into it. So basically, for this demo, we're going to imagine a utility in Iowa. And when I do this exercise, I'm not thinking of one utility, so no one think that I'm singling you out or anything like that. But let's say it's an EV or it's a utility in Iowa. Currently, they don't have a managed charging program, and they want to own and operate some electric vehicle service equipment to meet the market need for 5 years. The territory aligns with the EV market in Iowa. We're going to do this as an Iowan example because this is an Iowa webinar, with average/medium EV market growth expected. So as you first get into the tool, typically the first tab that you want to land on here is going to be the EV market tab. This is where everything starts. But basically, what we're going to do here is very first, and again, I would say let's remember our color coordination here. Orange is required, purple is optional, blue is default. So we start here. These are calculated values, right? We don't want to touch those, but orange is required. So we're going to go here. And like I said, for this scenario, our utility is going to be in Iowa. So we're going to select Iowa as the state. Also for scenario, we're going to say that we anticipate average/medium EV market growth is expected. So there is a market share growth rate. So that's going to be the annual year-over-year increase in market share. So for example, if there is 2% market share currently in Iowa, 50% market share growth rate would be next year would be 3%, from 2 to 3, right? Growth rate 50%. And then there's market share maximum. That's what we talked about earlier, where we think that the market share is going to max out at a certain percentage. There will always be diesel so-and-so trucks or whatever. So down here we see there are these suggested growth scenario values. There's low, medium, and high growth. And you'll notice, and I'm just going to point this out because it is important that the tool is so open source. You'll notice that this data here, these are not just random numbers, but actually a calculation. It's a percentile from the market data tab. And I'm going to skip ahead and show that. Market data here, this is the IHS market data. We have developed, basically it's the percentage of adoption year over year. And if you go from year to year, you can then calculate the percentage year over year growth. So it's back into our EV market tab. Like I said before, we're going to assume medium growth. So we're going to say this equals here and this equals here, which it already was. But other things I'll point out in this tab, this is a really cool tab just for, talking about sorry, I was just reading the chat there. Okay. Yeah, it's a real tab because it can show you how your state stacks up to the national average, right? So this yellow line here is the United States. This red line here is Iowa. You can see that Iowa currently, when it comes to market adoption, is a significant amount under the national average. Well, let's say, we expect those folks out in California to be hugging trees and driving EVs, as they say. You'll see that California's market adoption rate is much higher than the national average. For 2020, which is the most recent IHS market data that we have, they're at 8.4%, where the United States is nationally averaged at 2.5%. I will also point out, though, that there is some significant evidence that the growth rate in California is slower. So the year-over-year growth rate is slower than the United States average. What that tells me is that there were a lot of early adopters in California. The growth rate is still strong, but it is slowing, right? And you can also kind of see that here with these trend lines. Really interesting stuff. So yeah, this is the historical EV market share graph. And down here is a projected EV market share graph. You'll notice that earlier when we entered in the market share maximum of 75%, here's this red line, service area market share projected. You'll see that it maxes out at 70%, as well as the US market share right here. Yeah, let's see if there's anything else to say here. Yeah, basically these graphs are really interesting. I like to check out a bunch of different places, like, you can see Colorado, they're above the national average, but not quite as intense as California. But let's stick to our example here, folks. Let's do Iowa. Iowa has we have a better rate than California, which means we didn't have as much early adopters, but our market share currently is much smaller. So that's why it's so important that these Iowa utilities are on this call, because it's my personal belief, and from looking at the data, that we have a pretty explosive growth rate from 21 to 22 and 22 to 23. So what do we do about that explosive growth rate? Well, we go to the next tab and keep going on our tool. Yeah, so we've done everything here on the EV market tab. There's also some very cool things down here, some general vehicle data, where you could say, oh, I think that vehicle miles driven per year in Iowa are higher. It's going to be 15,000, So the purple, like we said before, the purple is an optional user input, and this teal color is a default value. So, here's some recommended ones, but I'm going to say, hey, we're in Iowa. There's a lot more vehicle miles driven per year. Let's make this, let's make it 15,000. And as you're going through this, these are the sorts of things you can tinker with, right? And then we have a percentage of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles as a percentage of all EV sales now. That kind of changes different things in the calculator, but basically on all these tabs, there's a lot of opportunity to dive super, super deep as the further you go down in the spreadsheet. So I may stay up here most of the time, but just know that if you're thinking, oh, I wish there were an ancillary calculator for this, it's probably already in the tool just for them. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the utility tab. We're in Iowa. Let's not think of this as Des Moines, but let's think of it as a good-sized Iowa town. Let's say there's 4,000 residential accounts served. And the service area population growth, let's assume that it's pretty healthy. We're going to see a 5% population growth here. Daytime charging factor. Let's assume that, maybe it's a suburb of Des Moines, and so people are going to be leaving during the day, but also there's a pretty heavy business community now in the suburbs. So let's say 90% of daytime charging is there. Gasoline price, it used to be $2. It is no longer $2. Iowa gasoline price. I believe in Iowa it's about $3 right now. Yeah, $2.93. Let's do $3. So the reason it's asking you for the gasoline price is that later on in the tool, it's going to calculate the net consumer benefit on a dollar basis to EV ownership. So basically talking about how, especially in this scenario, when gas is $3, owning an electric vehicle is a lot cheaper than owning a gas vehicle. And you as a utility, if you're going to be developing rebates for these customers, this is the sort of information you'll want to know, right? Like, do I need to be incentivizing it an insane amount because there's already this other benefit, questions like that. And then estimated EVs already in the service territory. Currently, the default value here, that is taking it as a percentage. So basically, it's taking from the market data tab the EV adoption rate and multiplying it by the amount of accounts served in your area, and then multiplying it by another factor to account for multiple vehicles in one household, that sort of thing. Yeah. So this is a really good tab. As a utility, you get to adjust a lot of these things. I will say that the default values when it comes to the utility tab are based on more of a national perspective. In Iowa, these numbers, especially down here, are going to be a lot less. So let's do 180,000 cost per megawatt year. 6 months out of the year, 6 months out of the year are going to be, our peak is after 4. This I think is going to be more in the 30 range, and this I think is going to be more in the 20 range. So that's the cool thing, depending on where you're at in the U.S., you can make a lot of changes to this basically as you see fit. Like I said before, there's real cost inflation rate. So that's not talking about the inflation of the U.S. dollar. That's talking more about rising cost, incorporating inflation of building these EV charging ports. If that's not very clear, talk to me after this presentation. Some service area calculations, population per residential account. This is some of those things you can dive in deeper. I'm going to leave as is for now. Yeah, some other stuff I wanted to say here. As you make adjustments, you can see off to the right here how this is affecting the EVs in your service territory, the annual gross cost to serve EVs. So let's say our town is 100,000 people instead of 40. You'll see how the number changed here on this y-axis. So the tool is very dynamic. You can enter in a new number. All the charts will change. All the dependence on other tabs will change. It's really powerful. And later on, we'll talk about goal seeking, using the goal seek function in Excel to say, hey, what would happen to hit this metric? That sort of thing. Another very cool part of the tool. Yeah, so the tool provides a rough estimate of the EVs in the service area. And I will say here, these numbers can be affected a lot by what type of generation is available in your area. So for Iowa, our cost is a lot lower than some of the folks on the coast. So that's why those costs went down there. The next tab is going to be the rates. So this is the rates that your customers pay, not your cost to purchase or produce energy. The electricity sales tax rate in Iowa, I'm going to say is 7%. I might be wrong on that, but I think that's correct. Dollar per kilowatt hour, we're going to make this 12. We're going to make this 1.2 cents or $0.012. Demand, we're going to keep that at 15, keep that at 1. Standard retail, dollar per kilowatt hour, let's make that 13 cents. Non-revenue, dollar per kilowatt hour. And again, if you're confused about what non-revenue dollar per kilowatt hour is, you can just hover over the comment right here and it'll be solar, energy efficiency, competitive supply, etc. These are the non-tax costs that customers pay, which do not produce revenue. So some different line items on your bills for your customers there. Yeah, so that is our rates. I will say, here is where you have a lot of really cool data. We're not even at the end of this. So the first one I'll point out is EV owner financial benefit versus gas. EVs, very beneficial here versus a gas car. Now, let's say, for example, oh, there's the US invents some new way to extract gasoline out of the ground, and now gas is $1 a gallon. It's like the 2000s, early 2000s again. You'll notice here that the EV owner financial benefit versus gas is now none, right? Because gas is so cheap. So let's not keep it that way. Let's keep it right at $3. And what we should see is very good rate. And I will say too, one thing that I really like to do when I have this open, in Excel, you can press the Alt key and then the W key and then the N key, which will open another instance of the same spreadsheet. And what you can, like, let's say you're on the rates and to see, oh, what would gas have to be to get me into this low category here? You can keep that open here and you can adjust it here. And as you adjust, you'll see it adjust over here. So let's make it 225. So that would have to be what it would be to get me into that low, but let's keep it exactly what it is, $3. And we'll close one of our windows and make this full screen. Yeah, so basically here's a lot of cool data that's popped up because we've entered in all of our variables and assumptions. The first thing I'll say here is, let's see. Basically, this is years from today. We have an increase in privately supplied plugs, and this is the plugs needed, the forecasted demand for plugs. So these are talking about DC fast charging plugs, right? So as more and more people get EVs, they're going to want fast charging in town so they can charge up their car super fast, and not everyone has to own a EV charger at their residence. So yeah, you can see that the EV owner financial benefit versus gas is very good right now. The private DC fast charging annual ownership cost per port, that's another helpful tool. And then here's a big one. This is the net electric vehicle revenue. And I'll say, here's the gross utility customer bill revenue in yellow on top here. If you're familiar with P&Ls, you'll recognize this sort of graph. The red bars are gross utility power supply costs. So we have revenue costs. And then the blue line in the middle is net bill revenue and power supply costs. Talking about kind of, net income on your EV program. And as you tweak these numbers here, this will change a lot, right? And that's what we want to see. We want dynamic graphs with changing variables. Let's see here. Just gonna get back on track. There we go. Yeah, another thing that I'll point out really briefly here is that, like I said before, you can there's a lot more things that you can adjust. One thing I'll highlight here in cell D60 is the default. So this is an annual compact gasoline vehicle cost, and here is a default vehicle lifetime cost of the vehicle. You could say, hey, we're in Iowa and our legislature's just decided to pass a $2,000 tax credit for this vehicle. Well, you can subtract $2,000 from this cost and it'll affect everything throughout the tool. There's other things you can implement down here. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and move on. So as we've said before in this scenario, the utility basically wants to own electric vehicle supply equipment to meet demand. So we're going to go to the EVSE market tab right here. And basically, there's a bunch of different things here, but there's charging plugs in the service area. And we're going to say, hey, we know, Jimmy down at Ralph's Supermarket, they've installed some workplace level 2 chargers. So we're going to say there's 2 there. And then there's some other public level 2 chargers at the gas station down the street. We'll say that there are 4 plugs there. So 2 plugs, 4 plugs. And the thing I would point out is that as we do this, it should affect the graphs over here. Again, we have ports needed, privately supplied ports, utility constructed ports. Let's see. Yeah. So this is a forecasting tool over here, and these are like the existing plugs that are in your service territory. Yeah. So now that we know what's existing in our service territory, we want to go to the electric vehicle service equipment strategy tab. And here, this is where you're going to see some different dynamic charts. Basically for DC fast plugs and public level 2 plugs. Right now we see that, this ports needed graph is going to drastically increase as the years go on here. So we could say, hey, around year 6 from now, we need to increase these ports supplied. So let's say, we're going to put in 3 charging ports with 2 plugs each to have 6 plugs, so 6 DC fast plugs. You'll see here that what that is doing is helping to meet the demand for those plugs. So let's say we needed 12 in that year. And you can kind of model these out as you go on to say, hey, we're going to put 2 extra plugs in each year. And you can shape that curve to meet your potential demand. And you might say, hey, why does this matter? Well, it can help you budget out some different costs for the future to meet your plug demand, keep your customers happy. So 12, 14. Yeah, so that can be very helpful when it comes to budgeting and multi-year plans for municipal utilities. The one thing I'll say is the more publicly utility-owned, publicly available charging plugs that you put into the market kind of suppresses privately supplied ports. So that's a thing to be aware of. And let's see. You could say, hey, we as a utility, we don't want to own any plugs. We don't want to be that racket. But what we do want to do is we want to provide an incentive for plugs. So you can come down here into this tab and say, hey, we want, for every public level 2 charger that you put in, we're going to supply a $4,000 rebate. You can see how that rebate increased over here, the privately supplied ports. So, the bigger the rebate, the better. Let's say it's 6,000. It's going to have a bigger impact on the growth rate of privately supplied ports. Yeah, so that's the electric vehicle service equipment strategy tab. This is really helpful when you're planning things out. It's incredibly powerful. I would encourage you all to spend some time with the tool because it can do things that I can't even do at this point. It's very, very handy. Yeah, so the last thing to do on this demo is just to go down here. There's a tab called the results overview. And this is where you're going to see kind of more the meat and potatoes financial metrics. You'll see in Iowa, as the growth rate is going slow, the market adoption rate is slow, and then kind of takes off. Your net benefit to the utility increases quite a bit, right? Your net EV related revenue. So yeah, it's cool to take this information and then see, what if we were a different state with different growth? Let's say we're Colorado. Yeah, it can make your results look very different, right? With a bigger growth rate, you have more net income. So when it comes to making EVs work for you as a utility, this entire tool helps you to prepare for the future and to make that work. So yeah, very, very handy. And let's see if there's anything in here that I wanted to talk about. Jeremy or Robert, do you guys have anything to add after seeing that demo?
No, I mean, I think you covered a lot of ground. I think the main, or one of the takeaways I would just offer is there is a lot in the tool, but you don't have to use it all. So, you know, if you're just getting started, you can just kind of take a look at some of the market information, maybe use some of the customer outreach materials, things like that. So don't feel like, you know, you have to immediately dive in to start thinking about, you know, how your utility might be investing in charging infrastructure and things like that. If you're not ready to go there, don't want to go there, you know, there may be some other aspects of the tools that could be helpful.
Yeah, and I would add, obviously, this is a lot of information being thrown at everyone for today's webinar and absorbing this tool maybe for the first time. So when you have an opportunity to sit with it, it'll sink in a little bit more, and you'll hopefully be able to start navigating it a little more effectively. And, you know, it can be as sophisticated as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be. If there's something that's not in here that you want to see, it's an open source tool. So you can build it out and add a new tab, add a new analysis, and expand your data that you need to do your planning. So a lot of flexibility with the tool. And the more you use it, the more familiar you'll get with it and see the value it can provide for your utility.
Absolutely. Great input from both of you guys. I'll say anecdotally, you know, like Jeremy said, when I first saw this tool, it was very hard for me to figure out what was going on inside of it, and to sort of see what sort of powers the tool has. But now that I've sat with it for a while, I can tell you it's incredibly powerful. It's got a lot of different things that it can do, and like they said, it's totally open source. So, I mean, you can do whatever you want with this. So it's very, very useful. And when I got this toolkit, honestly, the first thing that I did was I scrolled through this list and I checked out, oh, you know, what's the growth rate in every state? And I went over to the market data tab. Sorry, I'm trying to move my Zoom thing out of here. I went over to the market data tab and basically just looked at all of this interesting data and year-over-year trends, that sort of thing. So yeah, so let's see if there's anything else to say about this. Yeah, so there's a pretty interesting managed, sorry, I'm gonna check the chat here real quick. Yep. So there's a few questions about access to the spread file. If you are a IAMU member, you can send me an email after this webinar and I will send you the tool directly. It's also available on APPA's website currently. It's kind of stripped down version of the tool. APPA is planning to sell the tool to APPA members. So they are planning to make this tool not be free. If you are an IAMU member, we've been given the green light to distribute this tool for free. And even I think for APPA members, the tool price is going pretty insignificant. Under $100 for sure, probably under $50. Is APPA opening up to all members? Yes. So I'll keep an eye on the chat there. Very good. Another cool part of this tool is that this tool will help you develop a residential managed charging program. When I first heard that, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. What is that? Well, managed charging is all about encouraging your customer, right? The people who live in houses and work in businesses who are charging their electric vehicles, encouraging them to charge in a way that is beneficial to your grid, your system, and your costs, your bottom line, essentially. So what it is you know, discounted charging to charge at times when the energy doesn't cost you as the utility so much. Yeah, charge less non-revenue rate components. So there's a bunch of different stuff in this part of the tool where you can say, hey, we're going to do this program. It's going to start in this year. The network and admin cost per customer is going to be like, you know, let's say 30 bucks, whatever. There's an initial startup cost and a program fixed annual admin cost. So that, yeah, there's a lot of different variables that this thing captures. And basically you can tweak all of these numbers and then really hone in on what sort of benefit you want to see from your managed charging program. Yeah. So managed charging options, there's several varieties, smart level 2, customer installs electric vehicle supply equipment, charge off peak, and or the utility controls charging. This is like some summer saver programs, like where you set back your AC when it's during peak hours in the summer. You can bring your own charger as a variety where the customer agrees to charge off peak, and that behavior is verified with advanced metering infrastructure data. I know a lot of our members are not on board with AMI yet, but some of them are, and this is a model that other municipal utilities across the US have been able to implement effectively. And then there is onboard diagnostic plugin. Customer plugs this into OBD port. Charging behavior is then monitored. Yeah, the smart charging guide suggests values for the EV planning tool. Yeah, so I'm going to move on to the second demo here, if my computer will agree, and I'm going to try to be shorter than the first one I did. Yeah, so example 2. Let's stick with our same example. We're a municipal utility in Iowa. You know, we've got 40,000 residential accounts served. All of these default assumptions, same as before. But now we're going to go to this managed charging tab. And here we have residential EV peak megawatts. So that's, you know, megawatts is power, a very large unit of power. So this is your peak power consumption and on the residential side. And then there is the net residential EV income, right? So basically, there's a base case, which in this spreadsheet, a base case is no managed charging program. Anybody can charge whenever they want, willy-nilly, you know, no restrictions. And then there's a managed charging option where, hey, we'll implement some pricing controls to influence consumer behavior, right? And so right now, the red line on this graph is overlapping with the yellow line because there is no managed charging program. The base is managed charging. What we're going to do is we're going to go into here. We're going to play with some numbers and see how we reduce our peak megawatts, residential EV megawatts, and make it so basically we don't have to build out an insane amount of you know, infrastructure to be able to handle the increased peak as we electrify transportation and vehicles. So let's go ahead and go over here. Yeah, so same scenario as before. Let's see. So yeah, there's a discounted managed charging rate right now. This is kind of what our residential was when we set up our rate over here. Has the 13 cents per kilowatt hour or $0.13 per kilowatt hour. So back into managed charging, let's say we're going to discount this rate heavily, right? Because we really want to go aggressive and reduce this peak that we're going to have that's going to increase year over year as adoption increases. So, you know, we're going to say, hey, it's that from before, but we're going to take off 6 cents. And so what that does is now you're seeing a separation between the base case and the managed charging case. With that price control, to encourage our consumers to charge on off-peak hours, basically we've shifted our peak down. We've avoided potential pretty huge cost when it comes to transmission and generation to be able to meet that peak demand. We've avoided that, so that's really good, right? But as with anything, this managed charging program isn't going to happen for free. So we're going to say there's a network and admin per customer of $20, right? And so what you're going to see is that's going to bring our net residential EV income down. So I'll Control Z that. Red line moves up, Control Y to bring in that cost again. So our income is going down. So right now our peak isn't being affected by this variable, but our income is. So there's some other things that can affect our income. Initial program cost to start this thing up. Let's say, we go down the road and we play a Clear Result or an eSource or a VEIC or whoever does with this program, and we've got that $1,000 initial cost. And there's also a fixed admin cost of, let's say $300 a year. That's very rosy, but for the purposes of this this example, let's keep it at that. You'll kind of see how this has affected your residential EV income, but we've reduced our peak, which is what we really want to do. And then I'll say, we can go back over here to the results tab to see how this affects our income. We're going to turn this back to Iowa. And that's one thing, as you're messing around with this tool and adjusting a bunch of variables, if you notice something is off from what you expected it to be, you can just always go back and change it. It's really difficult. What I appreciate about this tool is that it's so open source, but it's also very difficult to break. Which if you're a heavy user of Excel tools, you know what I mean. But yeah, you can see that as we implemented these costs, so let's go back to our managed charging strategy and let's undo all these things. And let's go to make this Iowa. Basically right now our net income is 4.9 million over the next 10 years. And let's go back in here, let's adjust these things. Let's say 30. 20,000. Yeah, so you're going to see how this owner benefit gets decreased, and there should be some decreases to let's make this 5,000. You can basically play with this and see how it's going to affect your income, your net benefit to customers, that sort of thing. So very, very handy. I'm just going to make sure that I went through everything that I want to. Yeah, and here, sorry, I forgot to add one thing in there. The discounted rate for charging. But you can see if there were no cost to implement this, your net income is going to be like 4.3 million. But when you factor in the cost to implement this managed charging program, your net income is going to go down, right? So basically what this tool is doing is it's going to say, hey, there's a cost to doing this in terms of dollars, but there's also a benefit in terms of we don't have to upgrade our infrastructure. Very, very handy tool. And what I do all the time when I'm using it, I put it onto one side, I do Alt W in to give me a new window, and I keep one eye on the results tab and one eye over here and say, oh, let's make this 5,000. Let's make this 100. See how it changes the net income. Very, very handy tool. I love doing that. I could tinker with that all day, honestly. Yeah, you know, it's a very handy tool that'll help you develop a managed charging program. Honestly, we could go on for hours and hours, and we would still only be scraping the surface of what this thing can do. But you know, there's some really cool aspects to this tool, and I'm so happy. You know, we've done this project, and we've given municipal utilities in Iowa some means to be able to prepare for the future and to forecast and to see what's out there. You know, and I think it's a really helpful tool, and I'm extremely committed to helping, especially IAMU members, but really anyone who wants to use the tool, you know, change the tool, adapt the tool, update the tool. You know, I will be available. My contact info, I'm going to go ahead and put it up on here for people who may be watching this on demand. You can email me anytime, Gorrie at IAMU.org. I will also quickly promo the project library for DEED. If you are a APP member, American Public Power Association member, all of this data is currently located online, right? And yep, there's some different funding cycles. Here is mine and David Roberts' information, some of the DEED contact information. Real quick, I know we're going over, but I did just want to say real quick that there is a ton of marketing tools in here, right? So there is Adobe Illustrator icons that you can include in your own marketing collateral. There's some really well put together different infographics, some marketing infographics that you can talk about, oh, you know, level 1, 2, and level 3 charging. So level 1, level 2 DC fast charging. There's just so much resources in here. And I would encourage you all to check out these resources. If you email me, I can provide you a direct link. Yeah, this is one that I used for this webinar. Social media best practices. I used all of the hashtags that are recommended in here to promote this webinar. And obviously it worked because you're here. So thank you for attending. I did want to kick it over again and thank you to the VEIC team and to Jeremy for all the hard work that you guys have done. And I kind of wanted to give you the last word here before we open it up to questions. So did you folks want to add anything?
I'm feeling good. Thanks, Jeff. Doing a good job. I would just, I guess, offer, you know, some of the additional materials include a little guide to the managed charging program. So just more background than what we could put into the toolkit spreadsheet itself. So there's a kind of a standalone PDF doc that gets into a little more detail of what some of those different inputs might look like, depending on the types of programs people are doing. And then there's also the case studies that you mentioned at the outset that kind of provide really a broad spectrum of different types of public power utilities and what they're up to on EVs. So, you know, spanning the gamut from utilities like SMUD and Sacramento, who are really doing a ton of cutting edge stuff, to some of the other maybe smaller, more rural public power entities that are doing great programs, but not on the bleeding edge the way some others might be. And there it is. Looks like you're muted, Jeff.
Oh, there I am. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, I wish I could go deeper into detail on this webinar, but these studies are incredibly powerful, really well put together, can give you as a utility just some anecdotal evidence of, you know, what to do, how to act to prepare for the future. Really, really interesting. And how many case studies did you guys do? 6?
Seven.
Seven, right down the middle.
Yeah, it's some really interesting stuff. I mean, it's called a toolkit because it's more than just a spreadsheet.
And we tried to make sure that the case studies that we did were representative of all different sizes and makeups of public utilities, right? So we have some smaller utilities in here, as well as some of the larger, you know, Austin as examples. And so I think there's a lot of great resources in there and a lot of creative ideas about how to develop and promote EVs and EV programming. So I would encourage people to case study. I also just wanted to add, you know, when we were developing this tool, we were moving right along, and then COVID-19 happened, and so we faced a lot of challenges across our team and transitioning to a virtual environment, and still moving this project along, as well as changes in staffing with me taking on my new role as the sustainability manager with the city of Des Moines. But we were able to keep this going, finish out the development of this tool, and get it out to the IAMU membership more broadly. So I'm excited to see this tool get put to work by folks. We put a lot of time and effort into making this as strong of a tool as we could for all of you. Excited to see what comes of it down the road. No pun intended.
It's like you're muted again, Jeff.
Man, it must be one of those days for me. That's great, guys. I appreciate the input there at the end. At this point, I just wanted to open it up to questions. I didn't see any questions in the chat. I will say, if you do want a direct link to the tool, I'm going to throw my email in the chat. Go ahead and send me an email.
And Jeff, if anybody has any questions, if they want to unmute, they can do that too, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. You're very welcome to unmute and ask a question if you have one. I see we still have a good number of attendees on the call, so you're very welcome to unmute and ask a question if you have one.
Jeff, this is Jack Hedgecock. I know you mentioned this earlier. Do we just need to send you an email to get the toolkit? Is that what you mentioned?
That's what I would recommend. Yeah, there's a plan. APP has a plan to sell the tool, but they, like I said, have given us the green light to distribute the toolkit to our members for free. So yeah, if you guys would like to just send me an email, I'll make sure that you get everything in here. And I will say that IAMU is currently working with APPA to make some tweaks to the tool. So you may see different versions of the tool in the future. And then every year, I will probably end up updating the market data with new IHS toolkit data. So it's very robust. I wouldn't say that it's future-proof, but it is going to be useful into the future as we update the tool. So,
yeah, I mean, we're like everybody on the call. It appears to have a lot of power and flexibility. I'm just going to say, it's our opinion out here from the cheap seats, I guess, that 10% of the tool will probably get us 90% of the value. So that's the part we're going to have to learn. I really particularly like the fact that you had some, we'll call them training aids, because all of us have boards and councils. And when you put your toe in the water in new technology, you've got to be able to sell the business case for doing it and spending money. I think I told you, Jeff, we're in the process of we have a couple of level 2s. We're going to put a level 3 DC fast charger in this year, and we're trying to site it. Well, that's not an inexpensive investment, right? Public funds. Mm-hmm. So some of this had to be a little bit blind faith and my hand scratches and my calculations, and it'll be really good to push this through a tool that's had some study put behind it that we can prove the hypothesis, right? So the board members know we're doing the right thing with the money. So.
Absolutely. That's some really great input. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think, we're going to see a lot of growth in Iowa. Our adoption rate right now is very small. Like the percentage of EVs that make up the total vehicle market in Iowa is very small, but our growth is going to go through the roof. And, that's my personal opinion, but I'll also just cite, you've got companies like GM and Volvo and all these companies that are saying, we're going to stop selling cars with tailpipes. You know, what happens then as a municipal utility? You know, I think we're many, many years out from that, but because you also have to factor in there'd be a certain percentage of used cars on the road, but you know, the EVs are definitely coming, and I think that this is a fine tool to help prepare for that. Yeah, so I did want to say real quick that I did put our YouTube channel in the chat. This webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. There is also 2 very good recorded videos already that are the 2 tutorials that I did. The toolkit overview and then a quick overview on managed chain. And as you folks get the tool and you tinker with it, if you have questions or you want to say, hey, I figured out how to do this cool thing, send it my way. Definitely plan to be around and to help the tool grow and change as time goes on. YouTube channel, Piper, is, I'll send that to you. Let's see, make sure I'm sending this to everyone. All right, there's the YouTube channel in the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat as well. Yeah. So that is that's pretty much it. If we don't have any other questions, Jeremy or David, any final words you'd like to say?
None from me. Just thanks everyone for attending and learning about the tool today.
Same. Thanks, everybody.
Good deal. Thanks everyone for attending this webinar. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll see you next time. Take care.